It is the end of the year, and that means end of year business. Customers, clients, they're in the center of your attention, or let's say at least you say they are. And the question of today is, how customer oriented are you? Or are you at all? Are you really? Managers and leaders often say that, of course, the customer, the client, however you want to call that person or that group you're focusing on, are always at the center of any action they do. However, looking at obviously publicly available forums, we see that many complaints are online. Of course, the picture is a bit distorted. We know that people prefer more to talk about negative experiences in comparison to positive experiences, so we have to take that into account. At the end of the year, many people still spend either for presents, or if you have a different business model and, for example, provide professional services, they might have end of year budget, which they still have to spend, or you want to have their end of year commitment to invest with you or in you next year, 2022. So we have to see how customer oriented are businesses today. And by the way, just yesterday, I published a podcast where customer orientation, client orientation is extremely important. I interviewed on the English podcast Jeff Nelly, internationally well-known coach, also a leadership person from different coaching associations and federations, very experienced, who knows how important it is to focus on the person you're talking to. And if you're able to speak German, I interviewed Dirk Tickert, who works at a temp agency. So they are hiring out people temporarily, normally an industry which doesn't have a good reputation. However, his company is extremely successful with focusing on their internal and external customers in a very different way. Highly recommended to listen to both of them. But now we have to look into what are the problems and how is it possible that so many clients and customers say that they perceive very little customer orientation, especially during these days, online, offline, or anything in between in the hybrid world. Well, often people say that the internal problems of the vendor they are talking to are then made their problem. So there's an internal issue and they put the issue on your table and say, please solve it for us. And I give you an example which I have from my own experience. I remember when, for my company, I wanted to purchase a service, and I talked to a large company in Germany. I'm not going to mention the name here because that's not the point today. I wanted to buy a server, so I called them and I said, I'd like to buy the model XYZ, need a bit of consultancy on that, a bit of information, but then I'm ready to order. And they pretty much cut me off mid-sentence and said, do you have a customer or client number, client ID? And I said, no, of course I don't, because I want to become a customer, but I am not right now. Well, without a customer or client ID, I can't help you. You have to register for that first. And then they said, I have to apply to get the customer or client ID. Before that, they are unable to sell anything to me. Of course, any person who ever worked in sales is now sitting at this podcast and thinks, that's the way how I want to work. That's the way how I want to work, where I can say, I can't sell anything to you without a customer or client ID, and you actually have to apply for it. That is probably the worst sales approach on earth. So just for fun, I downloaded that PDF, which I found on their website. By the way, the customer representative I talked to on the phone couldn't tell me where on the website that was. I had to find it by myself. Then I had to print it out and either send it via mail, postal mail, or via fax. I mean, that's now more than 10 years ago, but still in the year 2008, 2009. That was way beyond what you can expect as a customer when you want to give money to someone to receive their services. So, and after weeks and weeks and weeks, I received a letter with congratulations, you now have this ID and you can purchase with us. I think that was 2 weeks after the servers which we ordered from Dell were already running in my company. So that is just one example of how horrible customer service can be. And it doesn't get much better than that in many cases, I have the impression. And often the main issue, or one of the main issues, is that management, leaders, executive, directors, senior leadership people only think that customer service creates cost, but little value. So you might think they try to get it the cheapest way possible, with, of course, tremendous consequences of the quality of customer service. And, of course, when you say, and that is the third part of often the issue, they say customer service is bad with any vendor. So when we deliver the same kind of bad service, no one will see the difference. And of course, that only leads to one aspect, that customers, clients of you are willing to change their vendor anytime because they have no connection with you. I give you an example of how customer service can make a difference. When I moved to London in 2014, I had to get internet. And you know how it goes. You register online, and then I had to pay a small fee, which was okay, paid by credit card, not because we have probably some German listeners who listen to this podcast. In Germany back in the days, it was very different. You had to wait for an invoice and then pay the invoice. Everything was on paper back in the Middle Ages. And I then received an email immediately where it said, call this number because a technician has to come to your flat and then set you up to be online. And I thought, oh, here we go. That is the beginning of the nightmare. Because I know that from Germany, and no matter if it was in Hamburg or Berlin, if it was Vodafone, O2 or Telecom, one was worse than the other. You normally had to wait for a couple of days or weeks even. You get a letter where it suddenly says, could you in 3 days stay at home from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. because a technician will come along in that time window. And even then, often the technician didn't even show up because they have to check some tech stuff in your flat and then you are online. It was the same nightmare over and over and over again, no matter where you went to in Germany. And so when I received the email way better, of course, than waiting for a postal mail, it says, call this number because we have to agree when a technician shows up. So I called, and I have to admit I was aggressive from the very beginning because I expected a nightmare to happen. And the company I called was Virgin. Virgin, owned by Richard Branson. I lived in Kensington. And I wanted to have internet, of course. So I called and they said, yeah, a technician has to show up. So when does it fit your schedule? And I was very positively surprised. I thought, oh, I can choose. So can I choose any day? And then the person said, well, it's already 2 p.m. So when you want to have it by tomorrow, there's nothing free before 10 a.m., I'm afraid. Well, I thought, well, that's okay. So 10 a.m. tomorrow works. And then they said, well, I thought, okay, here comes the downside. So they said, well, it's plus minus 15 minutes. So I said, did I get that right? I can choose that time, and the time is tomorrow, 10 a.m., plus minus 15 minutes, meaning between 9:45 and 10:15. And the person on the phone said, yes. So I said, perfect, agreed. Next day, 2 minutes past 10, of course, a bit disturbing for me as a German when you have an appointment at 10, 2 minutes past 10 already. It's a catastrophe. Just kidding. So 2 minutes past 10, someone rang at my door, got into my flat. 8 minutes past 10, I was online. And I still tell people about my experiences, how positive Virgin was when I, as someone who immigrated to the country, who didn't know how it goes in London, had to get internet, and Virgin was just the perfect experience. And I never had any other vendor ever since than Virgin. So you see how important customer service can be. Now, of course, we have to look, and by the way, any company can change. Even when you now say, well, we're not doing that well at the moment, maybe we should change. It's always possible to change. You can do training or coaching, consulting, mentoring projects. You can have project and interim managers who help you to implement it. And of course, during your events, you should have professional speakers who bring the topic with the right impulses, right ideas, right concepts into your organization. If you're interested, just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. nb@nb-networks.com. And if you need more than this podcast, by the way, lots of more opportunities to come. expert.nb-networks.com, expert.nb-networks.com. Just put on your email address there, and then you will see that every Wednesday you receive an email, 100% content at free guarantee with all the resources available. Much more than just this podcast. Of course, now we have to look into how to do it better. How can you deliver better customer service? So step number one is when you try to sell a product, let's face it, and let's face reality. Stop the marketing talk, stop the sales talk. We all have products, but let's face it, other people offer products quite similar as well. And of course, you can now say highest quality, yada, yada. Yes, of course, but if customers perceive it the same way, we don't know. However, when customers know that the customer service is way better with you than with any other company, you have customers forever. One of the reasons why, and I work in the very crowded market of professional services, even after many different crises, after the IT bubble burst and the 2001 terror attacks, the 2008 financial crisis, now with COVID-19. My business made it through more than 20 years because I'm easy to work with and I'm always focusing on the customer being properly available, probably 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And of course you can decide that is a bit challenging. Well, no one forces you to be self-employed. You need to be there when the customer needs you, and it's not your convenience to say when you don't want to be there. Of course you can say, and I know there is some sort of trend where people say, I'm deliberately unavailable. Congratulations. I strongly recommend that you listen to a talk which is publicly available from the Virginia Law School, an elite university, and they normally keep their lectures non-public, but Jim Donovan gave a speech. One is focusing on the work as a lawyer and a banker and professional services, and one is called Are You Destined to Deal? So he talks in two different speeches about how important it is to be available, and as soon as someone is not available and you say, sorry, I'm unavailable, they will call someone else. It doesn't mean that you have to burn out, of course, that is not the message here, but you need a system in place where customer service is available for the client and customer when they need it, not only when you need it. So it's very important now that you are there, and I highly recommend listening to the speeches of Jim Donovan from Virginia Law School. When we talk about good customer service, of course, people ask, is there any customer service which is too good? And actually there is, because often when people work for an organization and they hear managers talking, oh, there is too good customer service, they say, oh, that's just an excuse to cut costs. No, absolutely not. We can deliver customer service to a level which is so expensive that there is no profit left. And then, of course, we have to face the question, why did we do that? So there is a level of too good customer service. You only have to be better than your next best competitor. And when you are way better, then you should always wonder, is it needed? Does it give you an advantage which pays off in profit? And of course, in most cases, you see that having loyal customers is worth a lot more than anything else. And of course, when you now have this field of tension between management, leaders, directors, executive, customer service representatives, customer service leaders, you need excellent management and excellent leadership to be able to manage it. That is the third aspect of how to do it better. And often when people now think, oh, well, isn't management leadership and vice versa? No. Absolutely not. Management means you turn resources into value, often very process driven, but there are different approaches to that. Leadership is a whole different issue, whole different topic, and of course has a lot to do with leading people, motivating people, raising productivity, lowering employee turnover, raising motivation, etc. You can see all different publications I have there. Leadership is not the topic of today on this podcast, but you can see on ResearchGate and academia.edu, you can see all my publications about that over there. So you need excellent management and leadership to be able to handle that field of pressure, that field of tension between how good does the customer service need to be, and we still generate a profit out of the whole sales process. And of course, aspect number 4 of how to do it better, always be aware of the fact that in times of mass communication via social media, every single moment with a customer is a so-called moment of truth. If you fail once, but that person just puts it on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever platform it is, and that person has a followership there, no matter where it is, one Insta story, one Snapchat sent to 1 million people or 10,000 people, and suddenly you are part of the discussion. And always every time people think, oh, that doesn't really happen, does it? Well, just to give you a couple of examples, and there are many over the internet, but one which most of you will remember was United Airlines. Remember when your musician had a guitar and the guitar broke and United was unwilling to pay the damage? So he purchased a new guitar and wrote the song United Breaks Guitars. The song went viral on social media, and there was $2 or $3 billion damage to the United Airlines stock exchange price. So maybe you could have gotten a bit of customer service here by paying a $500 or even less guitar. Be sure that every contact you have with a customer is a moment of truth, and treat every customer exactly like that. And again, I can only highly recommend yesterday, great podcast with Jeff Nally about coaching, focusing on the person you're talking to, and on the German podcast, Dirk Tickert from a perm hiring agency about how to be successful in that area. Highly recommended. I know that we will have discussions about customer service and how much of that we need and what the right attitude is. Happy to discuss with you. Just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. nb@nb-networks.com. Now it is important that you apply what you heard and learned in this podcast today, because only what you apply brings in the important change that makes your organization sustainably more successful than any other competitor on the market. So at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.